What's up, guys? Erroneous here, back with another Raid Shadow Legends video. There's a bunch of new blessing changes, and one of the blessings that are getting rebalanced is going to be absolutely broken strong. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so we have a bunch of patches coming in very soon. We've got the rebalances to Angar and Fortis, which were kind of meh. And then also we have new rebalances to a bunch of blessings that really haven't been utilized very often by the player base just because they don't fit well pretty much anywhere in the game. So let's go over all these blessings that have been rebalanced. Let me go over to the first one here. All right, so the first one here is Dark Resolve. So Dark Resolve, it's really cool how they set this up here for us to easily be able to explain the before and after. I wish they did this with champions as well, where they have some pictures with the champions on the left side, and then they have the before on their abilities and then the after on their abilities if they are rebalanced, so you don't have to go back and forth all over the place. Now, Dark Resolve. It's a rare Divinity of the Dark blessing that you can utilize on your champions. Before, it had a chance of blocking any freeze, provoke, and true fear debuffs whenever an enemy tries to place them on this champion. And at a 6-star awakening, it's a 25% chance of blocking the debuffs with no cooldown, just 3 debuffs. Meh. I mean, I guess that would be considered for a rare champion, right? But of course, they wanted to scale it up, I'm assuming, for the legendary champions that we're utilizing, because most likely you're not utilizing this on any legendary champions, because they already had scaled up the defense, the HP, or the accuracy on the blessings based on the rarity of the champion. So it did scale up in that sense, but this doesn't seem like a legendary type blessing if you're just scaling the stats and not the actual blessing itself, what it does. So after, it does say, increases the damage inflicted by this champion according to the number of dead allies on their team, doesn't increase the damage from poison, HP, burn, and bomb. So they completely changed this blessing entirely. I guess if you have an unkillable type champion like Skull Crown, who places the unkillable at 1% HP, champions like Leorius, and other champs, maybe even Garal, who can place a unkillable, or even a Georgette who could place an unkillable. You could put this on them, but more than likely they're placing Soul Reap, right? But you could put this on those types of champions. There's an epic champion that comes to mind. I believe she's in the Knights Revenant as well. Let me just showcase her. So she's not really that great either way, but it's deathless. And for every ally that's dead, she has an AoE. It's on a 5-turn cooldown if you get her booked. Damage will always be critical if there are 2 or more dead allies. Damage increases according to the number of dead allies, except you have to figure out a way to keep her alive so she doesn't die. So maybe there's a use case for her now, potentially, if you put the Dark Resolve on her. Possibly. Let's go on to the next one here. All right, so we've got the next one here. It's Faultless Defense. So Faultless Defense, rare Divinity here of War. Before, the champion will receive less damage from each subsequent hit from multi-hit skills, which means it has to be a double hit, like from a Trunda. Maybe they'll take less damage. But again, it's so niche, you're not really facing a lot of champions that way. Like in Hydra, I don't think it would be considered multi-hit from that specific head that does 2 turns, because it's not from multi-hit skill. He's just taking 2 different turns and using different skills. So that doesn't really work in Hydra, right? And again, this is only going to work against champs that have multiple hits. So if you have other champions like Xenogur, for example, if Xenogur hits you 5 times in arena, you're going to take less damage per hit after the initial hit. So it could be okay. And let's see what they changed it to. They changed it to whenever an enemy attacks an ally under increased defense placed by this champion, reflects a portion of the damage back to the attacker. So they completely changed up this blessing as well. Is it good though? Reflects damage based on 15% of the damage reflected. Will it be good in Hydra against the Head of Wrath? I mean, the Head of Wrath, how much damage does he do? Maybe like 20, 30k damage to you? I mean, does it count as well if you're doing damage to the shield? I would assume so if you have this as like a reflection of damage, but I don't foresee a lot of people utilizing this still. Maybe you can utilize it on a support champion to get more damage in Hydra, if you're just specifically using that support champion in Hydra. I guess you could use it on a champion like that comes to mind, Snick Track. So Snick Track actually is pretty good in Hydra already with the reflect damage. So maybe if you put it on him, you put him in the lead with HP. He gives all the allies more HP. Does he place increased defense though? No, he doesn't. Okay, so you couldn't do it on him. Wow, that's annoying. So it has to be increased defense. So that kind of sucks. So, I mean, in general, you just have to have other champions. I just don't foresee anybody utilizing this. If it didn't have the increased defense there on it, like if it didn't say increased defense placed by the champion, you could utilize specific support champions that you actually want to utilize. Like you could consider putting this on a Molly Tankard. You could consider putting this on like a Snick Track. You could consider putting this on other champions that place, no buffs on your team. Just allow it to work already, no matter what. Because if it's just increased defense, it really limits the amount of champions that you can put this on, and most of those champions are going to be support-based champions. So, what do you think about that one? Leave it in the comments down below. I'm not a huge fan. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next one here is Heavencast. Heavencast is an epic rarity, Divinity of Light. Before, the debuffs placed by this champion's default skill will ignore a percentage of the target's resistance, which is not bad, but it's also not that great. It's decent. It's decent. Let's see what they changed it to. Increase the damage inflicted by this champion according to the number of buffs on the team. Doesn't increase the damage from poison, HP, burn, and bombs. So, 6-star Awakening, plus 2% damage for each buff. So if you have a Sifi, or if you have maybe it's a Duchess, who both place a good amount of buffs on the team, especially when they Veil or Perfect Veil or whatever, Sifi does do the increased defense. And now actually Sifi could be a champion that you put into Hydra if you have multiple copies with that previous blessing, now that I think about it. But a lot of people don't have Sifi, and she's OP, and you probably put something else on her potentially. So yeah, so this one here, it's probably going to be broken for, now that I think about it, Taras, potentially. This could be a broken blessing for Taras, but this isn't even the blessing that I'm talking about that is super broken. We're going to get to that one soon. But this one could be pretty insane on Taras, I will say. So if they're going to do even more damage, because Taras already scales based on buffs on the team anyways. So let me just go ahead and showcase to you Taras really quickly here. So Taras is the Bannerlords, one of the duos, the most powerful duos in the game. Right here, damage increases by 15% for each buff on all allies. Then increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Heals this champion by 5% for every buff that had its duration increase, and restores decreased max HP, which is also broken. So, yeah, so Heavencast, it could be insane on this champion. He could go nuts because he's already doing damage based on buffs, and then they're just adding more on top of it right here. They're just adding more and more damage. So that could be a good blessing that people want to use. And then, of course, you could use this on damage dealers in general for epics if you want to try to do more damage with the epics. But it's 2% damage per buff. So if you place 9 buffs, or actually 12 buffs on the team, times that by 2%, I mean, is it going to be additive 2%? I assume, because it says 2% per buff. So that's going to be 24% more damage, which is pretty strong. It's like adding another mastery from the masteries tree, but it's a little bit stronger than most masteries. I think all masteries, now that I think about it, other than Helm Smasher. So that's not a bad blessing buff. That's actually pretty good. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so we've got Indomitable Spirit, rare, Divinity of Light. Before, has a chance of blocking a stun, sleep, fear debuff whenever an enemy tries to place them on the champion. Had a 25% of chance of blocking debuffs with no cooldown at 6-star Awakening. And now it says, has a chance of blocking any stun, sleep, fear, true fear, freeze, and provoke. So that's way better than before. Whenever an enemy tries to place it on this champion. So that's going to be good for the Head of Wrath as well. And of course, good in general. So if you're in arena and you're getting frozen or provoked by those Ukos, or you're with the sets, that is, like a provoke set and a stun set, it has a chance 30% of blocking the debuffs with no cooldown. So it's a little bit of a higher chance to block that, but it's still very RNG based. So how many people are actually going to use this? A lot of early game players could use it. Mid game players, you could argue and say that you want to use it in arena for defense in arena, but Personally, I don't really use this on many champions unless I have to. Mainly it's on rares, and it was because of the stats that it gives you. So it doesn't showcase the stats on here, but it also gave like either defensive and accuracy or something like that. Let me just double check what it gave. That's the only reason why I put it on my champions that are rare, because it gives specific stats that I wanted on my rare champions. So if we go to Divinity of Light here, so let's go here. We've got Indomitable Spirit here. Yeah, defense and accuracy. So obviously the mythicals, that's a lot, right? 500 defense and then another 250. That's 750 defense right there. And they will be changing this as well on some of these blessings, or most of these blessings. So we'll get into that later as well. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so we've got Iron Will here. Iron Will, Divinity of Light as well. Before, decreases the damage this champion receives from enemy skills activated by other skills, or when enemies inflict damage when it's not their turn. So counterattacks, right? So if somebody does counterattacks, then for example, you could use Venus and the other dude. Yeah, Cupidus, that's what his name is. So Cupidus does do the counterattacks when Venus is on the same team, and a lot of people use that pairing, and the Iron Will actually help with that. So activated by skills other than enemies inflicting damage when it's not their turn, because it's not his turn, it will decrease the damage by 30% against that Cupidus team. But again, it'll also decrease the damage against Taras Marichka, right? Because Taras does his massive A2. It'll take away 30% of that damage, but honestly, it's not even going to help against Taras because he does so much damage on that A2 with the stun when you attack Marichka and they're on the same team and he counterattacks you, that this just won't even help you. So they change it over, and now it says decreases the damage this champion receives according to the number of debuffs on them. Doesn't decrease the damage from poison, HP burn, and bomb debuffs. Okay. Interesting. Decreases the damage this champion receives according to the number of debuffs. So they have to get a lot of debuffs, but it doesn't actually decrease the debuffs from bombs. Debuffs damage, rather, from bombs, HP burn, or poison. And like these are the biggest debuffs that you get placed on yourself in arena, so it's kind of silly. It's counterintuitive here. You know, I want to put this on somebody if I want to take less bombs damage, right? Decrease the damage received by 2%. That's it. It's according to the number of debuffs. So I guess it stacks up. So if you have 5 debuffs on you, it's going to be 10% less damage. I don't really like this one. Let me know what your thoughts and comments are down below. Maybe you guys can theory craft a little bit on this one. Just not a huge fan of the Iron Will. Let's move on to the next one. All right, Lethal Dose, man. I'm pretty sure they buffed this one already. They're buffing it again. So before, increases the damage enemies receive from poison debuffs if it's a 5-star by 100%. Now if it's a 5-star, increases the damage enemies receive from poison debuffs by 200%. But this is an arena blessing, so unless they're going to make this for PvE as well, it doesn't showcase it here, but this is an arena-only blessing. And people have stone skin, people have a lot of cleansers, people have high resistance, you know, and they just might not get the poisons on them in general. And then Marichka, of course, places the block damage whenever you place a poison or a bomb on her or the team. So honestly, Lethal Dose, still garbage in my opinion, unless they turn it into a PvE blessing where it does more damage to the waves. This would be an amazing, amazing PvE blessing. And a lot of people, even myself, I'd put this on multiple champions, especially Tomb Lord. You know, Tomb Lord is a really, really strong champion that I do use in my Doom Tower wave clearing content. And I would do it. People would put it on Theodore as well, or Calvalax as well. But you just don't use these champions to put poisons on enemies in arena because of the stupid Stone Skin and Marichka. So if this could go through Stone Skin like HP Burn, or can land on Stone Skin and do more damage to Stone Skin, then yes, people might consider putting this on. But it's still not strong enough, potentially, right? Because then you'd have to figure out a different way to create a team around these specific champions to be able to take down those enemies, which are super tanky to begin with, a lot of times on defense and arena. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this. And again, there's cleansers, of course, so they can just cleanse it off. Yeah, not a huge fan of Lethal Dose still. probably not going to be utilized by a lot of people, but let me know in the comments down below if you do decide to use Lethal Dose. And here we go. The blessing that I think is going to be absolutely broken beyond imagination, and will probably get a nerf very, very soon. So, Emergency Heal, which was formerly known as Carapace, or Carapace. So this is a rare blessing. Before, it had ability to, this champion will receive less damage when under stun, freeze, sleep, true fear, fear, and petrification. Okay, decrease the damage up to 30%. Okay, blessing. Halfway decent. I did put this one on a couple of rare champions, and it's decent. I put it on support champions. Now, afterwards, heals this champion whenever a shield buff placed on them expires, is removed, or is broken by an enemy attack. The value of the heal is equal to a portion of this champion's max HP. Heals this champion by 15% of the max HP if it's a 6-star awakening. That is in effect, the same as a regeneration set. So, just to showcase to you how many strong champions there are, and this is going to be broken because in Scarab Boss, you put on a shield, the champions will heal themselves if Scarab breaks through it. All the champions will heal, right? If they all have this, of course. And then you put this on, for example, Lanatharil, if you have multiple copies, and Lanatharil places his own shields. So Lanatharil could go in and start soloing Scarab Boss so easily. I mean, he can already do it, but you require more gear stats. But with Emergency Heal, this is going to allow him to solo with a Toxic set, or he also destroys max HP. You could put a Toxic set on. All he does is keeps on doing the Flicker Barrier, and maybe if he's of course a 6-star, but if he's a 1-star, then it's pretty much a similar heal to an Immortal set, right? So as long as the shield is broken, right? It's not just going to heal him every turn, and I know that. But if the shield breaks, you could also use them in Hydra as well, right? But again, you can easily solo PvE content. It's going to help you solo a lot of content. But again, how could you really, really, really make it even worse? Well, think about it. You have different sets in the game, right, that place a shield. Do I have any champs with a blood shield? If you have blood shield rings or blood shield accessories, in general, this is going to give the wearer a shield worth 5% of the damage dealt after attacking. So every time you're attacked and that shield goes away, because it's such a small shield, assuming that Plarium took this into account, which I doubt it, but they might have. I'm going to have some faith here, but maybe they didn't. So it could be super broken in this sense. If this person has a blood shield ring, it gets broken. They will heal by 3%, and there's no cooldown. So every time your ally attacks and then gets attacked back, heals up. So yeah, this is going to be insane, especially for people trying to beat hard dragon, maybe even hard Fire Knight, actually, now that I think about it, because you can put all of your champions in blood shield. So as soon as they get hit, hopefully they heal instantly before dying, before getting killed, basically. And it mitigates damage, essentially, because they're healing on top of it. Now, of course, you do need a high awakening to get the max potential out of this ability, but it's such a strong blessing in general. So this ability is just so strong if you put it on your champions and you're trying to solo or stay alive in content, especially for Hydra, right? You want to put it on, for example, if you put this on like your support champions that you're trying to keep alive in Hydra, and so they can stay alive longer. If you're going to put this on other champions like Husks or whatever, you could. Of course, you probably don't want to do that though, because they're damage dealers, and people will still potentially utilize blessings such as Cruelty, which does ignore defense or reduces the defense of the enemies every time you hit them. So, but again, you could consider using this if you're lower level, if you're trying to get through Hydra on easy, on like normal, hard or brutal. I mean, and then, yeah, you could just use this and potentially survive longer. So, yeah, but soloing content is going to be a thing. I swear it's going to be a thing. There's other champions you could put it on, like the Theodores, like Tomb Lords, in general, you could put it on Bannerlord champions. Rathalos might actually be really good. So one thing I noticed with Rathalos is he dies very often because he has a low, well, it's not too low, but it's a pretty low base defense, but mine dies pretty often in Hydra Nightmare. Probably going to use him in Brutal from now on. But if you put it on him and he has a high awakening level, he's going to stay alive longer. Now you're going to mitigate a little bit of damage because you can't put a stronger blessing on him. But if you're just looking for survivability so he can get more hits off, cool. But a lot of times most people are going to have the support champions to help keep him alive, whereas some people might not have the Krisks, might not have the Nekmos, might not have the Visiks yet, or other champions. So early game, mid game, late game, this might be a very strong blessing. And then a lot of people are just mainly going to use this to help solo content in general. So yeah, that's a crazy, crazy change in my opinion, and this one's going to be very sought after for people trying to solo content. All right, so we've got the change that we've all been waiting for. Polymorph. Let's see if it's going to be any good, though. That's the thing. Might not be good at all. Before, a chance of placing a sheep debuff on enemy champions for 2 turns whenever they place debuffs on this champion or remove or steal buffs from them. This debuff cannot be blocked as well as placed on a boss. And after, because I only see one change in yellow, has a chance of placing a sheep debuff on enemy champions for 2 turns whenever they place debuffs on this champion or when an enemy removes or steals buffs from them. Occurs once per enemy turn. So it basically right now, the way it works is, say you have a Madame Ceres. Madame Ceres first strips, right? So that's one chance to sheep. Now the Madame Ceres, and that's for any champion that has Polymorph. Now the Madame Ceres places decrease attack. That's another percentage chance to get Polymorph. And decrease defense. That's another chance to get Polymorph. And that's why Polymorph is so broken right now. So this change just makes it so it's once per turn. So I'm assuming that the way it's going to work, it just means that once the Madame Ceres takes a turn, it'll work one time, and it won't work for the decreased defense and decreased attack. It's just going to work against the strip from Madame Ceres. And if it does proc, then she gets sheeped and she doesn't strip everybody else, or potentially she does and it's just weird, like a weird glitch potentially. Everything else is exactly the same. So that's the Polymorph Blessing nerf. Is it going to be enough though? I don't know. Will it only work? And my other thing is it only going to work with one enemy champion that has Polymorph? Because what I see in Arena, at least on the high end of Arena, is all 4 champions on defense will have Polymorph at a high awakening 6-star, 5-star, 6-star. And so it's just impossible to bring in like a Ramantu or other strip champions or debuff champions because they get sheeped nonstop. So this time around, I'm wondering if it's just 4 chances to proc on each enemy and a high awakening, and I'm pretty sure it's like 20% for the sheep. So in terms of sheep here, how many do I have in sheep? I just have my UDK and maybe one other, but that's because he's not in a high awakening. So 20% chance. So I think you just get one shot. 20%, that's it. Irresistible. So if the 20% procs, they turn into a sheep, but it won't count on multiple buffs. So it's if he has 4 buffs on him from a Sifi or whatever, multiple buffs, and someone tries to strip me like a Ramantu, it'll only proc one time. It won't proc for every single buff that I have and for every single debuff that the champion places. So that is a significant nerf in my opinion. It is a pretty significant nerf now that I think about it. Because, so it's still, sheep is still going to be a thing, right? People are still going to gamble and use RNG to their advantage. And yes, you'll still lose some fights, but it's not going to be nearly as bad. I think that they could have done a little bit more with it, or just maybe gave us a little bit more context behind it as to the exact reasoning, but I'm going to see what I can find from the chat, and I'll be right back. All right, y'all, so here's some information I pulled from the chat from earlier today. We've got Polymorph Rebalance. PvP meta was tremendously impacted with the release of Sheep, rendering debuff champions like Ramantu less effective and enabling tanky teams on Arena, which in turn increased the average battle time and pushed the players towards outliving the opponent, which we don't want to see that. We have been monitoring the Polymorph performance since its launch in-game and gradually implementing various small changes, with the end goal of eventually bringing sheep to the point where it is still an impactful and competitive blessing, but at the same time, it becomes less frustrating and more predictable for the player base. We anticipate that this most recent polymorph change will shift the PvP meta faster and more dynamic battles, and debuff champions become more relevant again. So that's going to be big. But of course, yes, they can still be sheeped. Full or partial rework of blessings, which I just went over. Blessing stat bonuses. Oh, so they're changing blessing stat bonus as well, which I mentioned earlier. So each blessing provided its unique set of bonuses to the champion stats, and because of the bonuses could vary from blessing to blessing, this would force a player to make difficult choice when prioritizing and choosing between stat bonuses or value of skill itself. With this blessing rebalance, we ultimately decide to change the system and make all blessings provide the same stat bonuses, thereby increasing the base value of each blessing regardless of its unique skill. This should give you more room for experimentation because now you can try out different blessings without the fear of losing valuable stats on your champion. So as I said earlier, I would pick certain blessings that were rare or epic just because of the stats that are on them, not because of the blessing, what it does itself. So this actually is a cool change. Although we don't know exactly what they're going to change, well, I know what they're going to change. We just don't know how much they're going to change, right? So let's see what they do here. So they did make some clarifications later on in the day. I can see that the last part of the announcement caused a lot of confusion, so let's not wait till the next update. So now every blessing will grant a bonus to HP, attack, defense, damage, which is crit damage, I assume. Resistance, accuracy, and speed, the values remain the same across all the blessings. Okay, every single blessing will have this. Now defense-based champions can now get more, scale up with more damage, whereas, other champions might not. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to be because we don't know what the stats are going to be. So the stats could be really great or they could be not so great. I guess we are only going to find out once that release comes into play. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you all. Hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.